All right. Let's talk about my beloved bright one. I'm not kidding, Romana. People think I'm joking. Here's the beloved bright one, home delivered, still hanging in there, bright one. You management is trying to destroy my newspaper that I've been reading since the 60s, before most of you people were even born. I'm still reading the newspaper, still supporting it. Hey, you management types, do you have a subscription to the Sun Times? I don't think so. Sorry, Ramon, I had to go there. Um, we talked about this the last time we were in the show, and leave her alone, people. Sometimes people, she has a First Amendment right to speak her mind. Okay, um, they're asked. They invited journalists at the Sun Times uh, to take a buyout, and some of them have announced that they're taking the buyout. Whether the Sun Times accepts the offers to take the buyout is something else completely. It's a very painful time for me, this old baby boomer who's been reading the Sun Times, Romana, since the 60s and remembers when the Sun Times was like a leader. We, there are very few people who defied Mayor Daley, old man Mayor Daley, not baby Daley. Well, very few people who defied baby Daley. You're married to one and you're talking to another. And very few who defied Rahm. But the bright one did some really great reporting back in the late 60s and early 70s on a lot of issues, particularly the assassination of Fred Hampton. So I always have some love in my heart for the bright one, for taking strong stands. It's very painful for me to see the Sun Times shrink, to see them forcing journalists to come face to face with retire, maybe before they want to retire. And it's very disappointing to me as a lifelong, really, Chicago Sun-Times reader, devoted subscriber, talk about it all endlessly on the show with my guests. And I know it must be even more painful for you, because not only you were a long-time Chicago Sun-Times reader, you're a long-time Chicago Sun-Times employee, and many of the people that have been taking buyouts or talking about them are your friends and colleagues, people that you really love and care about. So why don't you take a moment to talk about the situation with the Sun Times and your thoughts? Go ahead.
Yeah, the last couple weeks, ever since we found out about these buyout offers, it's been really unsettling and very depressing. You probably have seen some of the names that, people who like kind of spoke out and publicly who are taking the buyouts. That includes my boss, editorial editor Lorraine Forte. Rick Morrissey is one of them. Annie C. From the Sun Times, who covers WNBA and women's sports. She's another person that's taking the buyout. There's a couple editors that I know who are taking it. Someone called me yesterday and they're like, don't tell anybody, but I'm taking a buyout. Don't even tell Mick. And, so I told Mick, I'm like, well, I can't tell you, so I want to be loyal. So, it's like, that's why part of the reason why I did even that column is because it's just been so sad. I write about serious issues sometimes. Sometimes I write about more, lightweight, levity. There's some levity in it. And I felt like I needed to write something that would make me, at least kind of smile, or make others smile and just feel better. It's been very, very hard. Next week is the first time that it's going to be without, I think, 30 to 40 staff members. Not everybody's on the news side. There might be some people on the business side, but the bulk of the people who are leaving are people who work on the news side. In terms of like the newspaper itself, that means writers, editors, others. And there's probably some names who I haven't heard, that I'll be surprised myself to see. And so some people are okay with their names being out in public, because people are saying that they're taking the buyout, they're letting people know. People are asking me about it. And then when I tell them other names, they're just like shocked. And I'm like, yeah, I'm shocked too. Management can deny someone's buyout offer. I know they've done that with at least one person that I know. And I don't know. I think we'll know more later this week. But Friday will be the last day for those whose buyout offers have been approved. And so it's like a really, really tough time right now for those of us who are in the newsroom. A lot of people are just feeling upset, which, whether they're leaving or staying. Sometimes I wonder I'm thinking to myself, like, am I making the right decision by staying? For me, my strategy was, well, I can keep writing my columns and try to figure out what I'm going to do next. I was telling someone, I'm married to another journalist. I'm not like, rolling in the dough here, like, so like, and so I'm like, okay, I'm married to another journalist. And, the buyout offer, once the money runs out, will I have a job, or will I do something? Will I be forced to do something I don't want to do? So my strategy was, well, at least, I don't know what's going to happen to the Sun Times, but at least I can still write. That's just my goal, to at least write a column once a month. I'd like to do it for more than once a month, but for now, at least I get to like have my voice out there. That's just the way I see it. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I've been assured, I want to say assured, and like, I've been told that, yeah, you can keep writing your column once a month. But, I still don't know details of what exactly I'm going to be doing, because there's going to be quite a few people, even on my team, who are going to be gone. I can tell you that. And so there's going to be a lot of changes in the Sun Times. And I don't know what's going on in management's head. I'm not in management, but I know on our end, like, this means people who are reporters, editors, everybody just feels like gutted right now. And it's just like a sad feeling. Like, every weekend, like, I've never been someone that would, even when I'm, it's like a bad time at the paper, like, I don't want, some days I haven't been wanting to work in the morning. I'm just like, Lorraine, I'm not going to see you next week. And Lorraine's been like a champion of mine. If it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't have a column. And, she's just always been very respectful. And so just to lose someone like that is really hard for me. And, I've been told by others, like, if I, Lorraine's told me, if you need any, help or have any questions, like, help thing, and I pretty much work with her. So she told me that, you can always call me, like, you're stuck doing whatever you're doing. And so that it's good to hear, but it's a very, very depressing time right now at the Sun Times. And, I'm hoping to see some people on Friday. We're going to get together, a lot of staffers, but I don't know, I don't want everybody to start crying. You know what I mean? I might start crying. I've shed some tears since I found out about the buyouts. I was like, what's going to happen? Like, it's just, to save that much money, like, you have to cut so many people. We're already like short staffed. And, you probably know that, just being at the Reader, when a newspaper is struggling, just cutting, how much more can you cut? Or like a media company is struggling, you always like kind of think like, you can't cut anymore. And then they keep cutting and cutting. And it's just like, well, what's going to happen eventually? And so that's one of the things that's like, a lot of people are just wondering. They're just like, what does this even mean for the Sun Times anymore? Is this the beginning of the end? A lot of people are asking. So yeah, it's just, really hard. And I'm one of those people who doesn't really, work isn't the number one thing in my life. At the end of the day, my family and friends and their health and happiness is the most important thing. And I try not to let work define who I am. But, it's still something that I do. I spend a lot of time working. I just don't want, I just don't want certain things to change. I still think news is really important. And especially given, the current climate in our country, it's like the fewer journalists we have, the more, I think, the more, dangerous it's going to be. Like, there's, where are there going to be the checks and balances? And like you, Ben, I criticize mainstream media too. Don't get me wrong. I've always criticized mainstream media. And that's kind of one of the reasons I kind of stay in it. I'm like, well, if I don't, like a lot of me, like people like me and other people from marginalized groups feel like, well, if we leave, then what's going to happen in the paper? What's going to happen to like the way people cover our communities? So these are just kind of questions we have, and we feel like we have to stay for like the good. And, when you're talking about Rosie O'Donnell, I always find it funny. I mean, that's great if she can go to, Ireland. I love Ireland. I think it's an awesome country. But I feel like a lot of people who say that, there are people who wouldn't be hurt by the Trump administration because of who they are. and it's usually people who are privileged. And my feeling is, I don't know. I mean, maybe there'll be a point where I'm going to be, kicked out of the country, or that could happen, or where I'm forced out of the country. But right now, my feeling is, well, if everybody leaves the country that doesn't like what's happening in the administration, then who's left? So I kind of feel like there has to be people who have to stay and resist. And I feel like when you have fewer journalists out there, it's like, who's going to be like, and I'm not saying all journalists are doing the perfect job and resisting or and covering Trump, but the way a lot of newsrooms are organized right now, it's like you're making that harder to do.
Yeah.
So it's a really sad time right now.
It is, and I'm going to stick to national coverage because I feel that the local coverage in Chicago is a whole different ballgame. The bias, the way it works in local coverage, it's much different. So I'm going to put that to the side and stick to national coverage. And with the exception of Fox, which is just a bunch of cheerleaders for Trump, I'm more or less encouraged. I'm like beyond encouraged by the coverage that, like I said, I can name 5 papers that I follow, and then there's the new form, the Substacks, the journalists who've left mainstream newspapers and have gone out on their own, much like I have, and I find that very encouraging. And I'll just speak an obvious point here. So, the big hits on Instagram, you'll get the Daily Show and Jon Stewart, and, Trevor Noah before him, and the celebrities, Stephen Colbert, et cetera, and so forth. And they have these witty put downs of Trump, and they do a good job of exposing some of the hypocrisies. They're getting their news from newspapers.
Yeah.
You think Stephen Colbert or Jon Stewart is digging out this stuff? No. You know what they do? Okay, they're not like me. They don't have an actual newspaper, I suppose, but they're on their freaking phone reading a newspaper and reading the work, and it costs money to employ a person. And the old means of raising money for the media has been destroyed by Google and Meta, and I could go on and on about this. And so every newspaper in the country is struggling to figure out a way to pay its bills. And most of them are passing the hat. The Sun-Times has been passing the hat for I don't know how long now, several years. I get emails, solicitations all the time. I go, I am a subscriber. You realize it. I'm still getting solicitations. So I do not know. I don't know how we can afford to go to a country, to have a country where there are no journalistic checks and balances. You can't depend on Congress. We just saw last week the Democrats lay down and roll over in that filibuster vote, which we talked about it at length with David Ferris last week, Romana. So I don't know. This is a really challenging moment for our democracy, and not to have journalists covering it and holding them accountable. It's a truly scary thing, and that's why Trump is always calling him and J.D. Vance are always saying that journalists are the enemy of the state. They want MAGA to hate us, but we're supposed to feel bad about MAGA's feelings. Sorry, Bill Maher. Oh, it's so mean what you're doing to MAGA. So I hear you, Romana, and man, tough day, tough time at the Bright One.